Do you believe that Shaquille O'Neal is right to say that Steph Curry is essentially a top 10 player of all time in NBA history?
I absolutely do. And again, before anybody chops this up, these are all opinionated conversations. If you don't believe it, that's fine. If you disagree with it, that's fine. I'm speaking for myself here. Based on the lists of multiple sources I have seen, based on the list that I have in my own mind, and I'm just going to use ESPN because they talked about the top 75 players of all time and they ranked them personally within their website. I'm going to read it from 10 to 1. Shaquille O'Neal, arguably the most dominant player in basketball history. Kobe Bryant, the second coming of Michael Jordan, 5-time NBA champion, rest in peace. We then have, of course, now my computer wants to lag. Tim Duncan, arguably the greatest power forward of all time. Then you move into 7, Larry Bird, one of the most iconic players in NBA history, the greatest Celtic, depending on who you ask, of all time. Wilt Chamberlain, the man that scored 100 points in a game, the man that averaged 30 points per game throughout his entire career and 23 rebounds. Magic Johnson, the greatest point guard of all time, Showtime Lakers, 5-time champion. Bill Russell, the most decorated champion in NBA history, 11 times, all-time great Celtic. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, all-time NBA scoring leader, multiple-time champion. Then you go into LeBron James, 4-time NBA champ, top 4 in NBA scoring, arguably the second best player to ever play the game of basketball other than Michael Jordan, who is, of course, rounding out the number 1, the GOAT. His airness, 6-time NBA champion, 6-time Finals MVP. Everybody knows MJ's record. Everybody knows what he means to the sport. But that's ESPN's top 10. In my personal opinion, if Steph Curry gets his 4th ring, it ties him with Braun. Got more rings than Larry. He's got the same amount of rings as Shaq, one short of Kobe. You know what I'm saying? There's plenty of players on this list in which you can look at him and say, all right, he's got hardware to match it. 2-time MVP, multiple-time All-Star, all-time three-point make, all-time most threes made in the playoffs, most threes made in the finals. We're talking about the greatest shooter of all time. When you talk about a top 10, you have to think about some of the greatest position players ever. Shaq was the most dominant center of all time. Michael Jordan was the greatest shooting guard of all time. LeBron James is the greatest small forward of all time. Larry Bird is in there for one of the best small forwards of all time. But if I had to make a substitution, if I had to take somebody out, I potentially would say, this is no shade or disrespect, I think Bill Russell might have to step out. Bill Russell played in an era in which they won 11 chips. They were the most dominant team in the league. They didn't have a whole lot of teams in the NBA back then. They didn't have a whole lot of talent outside of Bill Russell and the Celtics in terms of dominance. They did not have people of his size and magnitude to which he was dominating the boards. And besides, he's only a 15-point per game average scorer. I understand that hardware speaks volume, and that's the biggest argument that we talk about against Braun and Jordan. But if we're talking about this, we're talking about 2 different eras, 2 different time periods. Steph Curry is playing in a very complex league to where the three-point shot has become arguably the most important scoring platform in the sport today. Steph Curry's also played in the era in which there are multitudes of Hall of Famers throughout his entire career. Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant. I mean, just to name a few people that he's played against and with. Kyrie Irving. The list is truly endless. Like the talent that Steph has had to go up against. And again, if he was to win this 4th ring, I think that puts him in because he was able to do this again without Kevin Durant. Because the narrative for a lot of people was, well, the first ring didn't count because all of the injuries. The second and third rings didn't necessarily count because KD carried them. This team has been good before KD. And if we're going to talk about a bunch of what ifs, there have been plenty of playoff runs that should not count. I mean, should Boston be here right now, considering all the injuries that they had to go through? Chris Middleton wasn't available. Obviously, Jimmy Butler was playing on a banged-up knee. You can play the what-if game all day. You still have to win the basketball game to get to the platform and then, of course, win the championship. Steph Curry is literally one of the most influential and iconic players in NBA history. And I believe he rightfully deserves a spot on this list because he's done it all. And he's also kept his nose clean through his entire career, not a trash talker, very calm and quiet individual, has played on the same team. I mean, come on now. All the players that are on this list outside of Michael haven't really. No, never mind. I can't even say that because Kobe did it too. In terms of playing for one team and winning championships on one team, Tim Duncan did it also. So disregard that statement. But I mean, realistically, I don't see why Steph can't be on this list if you have the greatest passer of all time on the list, the greatest big of all time on this list, the, the greatest player of all time on this list. Why not have the greatest shooter? Steph Curry is consistently breaking records in and out every single year. And he's carried his team throughout this entire playoff run at the age of 33, 34. Steph Curry deserves a spot, man. Now, it depends on who you want to remove. I've given my opinion. Kyle, who you got, man? Is Steph Curry an all-time top 10 player in the league?
Um, yeah, the way that I look at it, I would have to put him in my top 10. And the reason why he revolutionized the game at basically at a similar level to what I think like Michael Jordan did. Like I'm not saying that Steph Curry's impact is bigger than what Michael Jordan did to the game of basketball, but just the way that the game is played, that's where, Steph took the game to a new level with the way that he was able to revolutionize it by the way that he just knocks down 3-point shots because now everybody's chucking up threes. And Steph was really the catalyst that brought that to the forefront, and not only in this generation, but for generations after Steph is, retired and gone from the NBA. I'm not going to take as long as Kevin so eloquently put. Um, the way that I see the top 10 is very similar to what Kevin outlined. When I look at Steph as just an individual player, his overall legacy, he's a phenomenal player. He's by far and away the greatest shooter of all time. And people are saying this, and I could say this, pretty confidently. He's still playing, and people are already basically giving him his roses by saying, no, not only is he like the best like 3-point shooter that we've ever seen, he's the greatest shooter that we've ever seen. And Steph is still relatively in his prime. I mean, granted, he is 33, 34 years old, but the way that he plays the game, he could play at this level for the next 4 to 5 years, potentially even 6 years. So, you're talking about an element of greatness that could potentially extend, you know, beyond a decade since he won his first NBA title, which was around 27 years old. I mean, the guy is phenomenal. He's a 3-time champion. He could potentially be a 4-time champion if Golden State were to win Game 6 in Boston on Thursday. He could potentially win his first NBA Finals MVP if Golden State were to win this series over Boston. And to me, when I look at the best players of this generation, I think he's basically right alongside LeBron James at this current moment in time. And I know that we always look at LeBron James as essentially the guy that's basically running and gunning for the greatest player of all time in Michael Jordan. But when I look at Steph Curry, Steph's impact for this generation is by far and away bigger than what LeBron is. I think LeBron, just his overall impact to the team that he's on, that's why he's always regarded as one of the greatest players who's ever lived because LeBron for 8 straight years went to an NBA Finals. Steph hasn't done that. That's where I think LeBron kind of gets the nod over Steph, just because I think LeBron had just that era of longevity of making the finals every year. The guy's been to 10 NBA Finals. Steph hasn't gotten anywhere near that yet. But where Steph makes it up is his ability to knock down 3-point shots, his ability to create space essentially effortlessly, and he transformed and revolutionized the game in a way that nobody has ever seen before. So, I mean, granted, we've had great NBA players in the past. I mean, Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time. LeBron James is one of the greatest players that we've seen, not only in this generation, but of all time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you could make a case that he could potentially be the greatest player of all time. And then when you have guys like Magic, Larry Bird, Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Shaq. I mean, all of these guys are in rarefied air that have all made their individual impacts to the game of basketball and made it for the better. Steph is definitely one of those players. And I mean, to me, no matter if Golden State wins or loses this series against Boston in the finals, I think it's safe to say that Steph is well deserving of being in the top 10 of the greatest basketball players who ever lived. And granted, it really kind of depends on who you ask. If you tell somebody who's like 30 years older than me, they may have a completely different list. They wouldn't even have LeBron James in this top 10 list. But, from how I see it, I'm 27, so I didn't get to watch Michael Jordan. I didn't get to watch Larry Bird, uh, Magic, Kareem, like when they were actually playing. But I always give respect to those players that, came before my time. I always give respect to those guys because they were able to push the game forward before I was even alive. But I think when we look at someone like Steph, I think Steph has proven that he deserves to be in that top 10 list of all time. I mean, to be anywhere near this list of top 10 greatest players who have ever played the game. I mean, if you were top 20, I mean, you're talking about literally like a millionth percentile of the NBA players that have come and gone through the league. So the fact of the matter is that Steph is in this conversation. It's really a testament to how good of a player he is. And just to kind of wrap this up, I do think that Steph um will go down as not only the greatest shooter of all time, I think he will go down as one of the top 10 players who have ever played the game.